Frank Miller stood in the bedroom he'd built with his own hands, turning the small velvet jewelry box over in his calloused palms. 20 years. That's how long these hands had been working to give Sarah everything she deserved. 20 years of hauling lumber, pouring concrete, framing houses for other families while perfecting the one he'd built for his own. The morning light caught the scars on his knuckles, a roadmap of labor. That told the story of their marriage better than any photo album could. He remembered how Sarah used to trace these rough patches with her soft fingertips during their early years, calling them her worry stones, saying they reminded her how hard he worked for their future. Frank set the jewelry box on the dresser and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard he'd landscaped himself. Every fence post, every planted shrub, every stone in the pathway, all placed with Sarah in mind. The rose garden bloomed with varieties she'd pointed out in magazines. He'd learned their Latin names just to surprise her. The house was his masterpiece. Not grand, but purposeful. The kitchen cabinets were solid oak because Sarah had mentioned once how her grandmother's oak furniture lasted generations. The bathroom tiles were the exact seafoam green she'd admired in a hotel on their 5th anniversary. He'd searched 6 suppliers for that color. They'd met at Murphy's Diner on Route 9. She was waitressing to save for community college. He was working his first construction job, stopping in every morning for coffee and eggs. It took him 3 months to ask her out. When he finally did, stammering through an invitation to a movie, she'd smiled and said she'd been wondering what took him so long. "I know I'm not like those college boys," he'd told her on their 3rd date. "I don't have fancy words or a degree. But I promise you this. I'll work every day to give you a good home. You'll never worry about the next meal or the roof over your head." Sarah had taken his rough hands in her soft ones. "Frank Miller, you're worth 10 of those college boys," she'd replied with genuine warmth. He'd kept that promise. Through economic downturns that killed construction work for months. Through the back injury that had him eating painkillers like candy just to keep swinging a hammer. Through 16-hour days in blazing heat and bitter cold. Every Friday, his paycheck went into their joint account, minus just enough for gas and lunch money. The sacrifices had been small, but accumulated. The new circular saw he'd passed on to buy her the complete works of Jane Austen. The work boots held together with duct tape so she could get her hair done for her sister's wedding. The woodworking workshop he'd dreamed of, perpetually postponed so she could redecorate. Frank checked his watch. 4:30 p.m. Time to pick up flowers and get ready for their anniversary dinner. 20 years deserved something special. He'd made reservations at Chez Laurent, the French place downtown Sarah had been mentioning. Tony, his foreman, had nearly choked when Frank mentioned the prices. $300 for dinner? You building them a new kitchen? Tony had asked, but it was worth it. Sarah was worth it. As he pulled on his jacket, the one Sarah had helped him pick out last Christmas, Frank reflected on recent months. She'd been distant. Shorter conversations at dinner. Less interest in his workday stories. More time on her phone angled away. She'd stopped coming to bed with him, claiming she wasn't tired, staying up scrolling through something that made her occasionally laugh or sigh. But marriages had rhythms. 20 years was a long time. Tonight would remind them both why they'd chosen each other. The flower shop was nearly closing when he arrived. Mrs. Gray recognized him and quickly assembled a bouquet. "Anniversary?" she asked, adding an extra white rose. 20 years, Frank confirmed with pride. "Beautiful," Mrs. Gray said. "Not many marriages last that long anymore." The drive home was peaceful. Frank imagined Sarah's face when she saw the flowers, the restaurant reservation, the sapphire pendant he'd been making payments on for 6 months. He walked through the front door with confidence earned over 2 decades. "Sarah, honey, I'm home. Happy anniversary," he called out with genuine warmth. The house was quiet. Then footsteps from the kitchen. Sarah appeared in the doorway, and Frank's smile faded. Her expression wasn't happiness or surprise. It was something that made his stomach clench with unexpected dread. "Flowers?" Sarah said flatly, not even looking at them. "From the grocery store." "No, from Gray's Flowers." "You know, the place on Main Street," Frank corrected gently. Sarah made a dismissive sound and turned toward the kitchen. Frank followed, still holding the flowers. The sapphire pendant burned in his jacket pocket. "I made reservations," he said to her, retreating back. "Chez Laurent, 7:30. She spun around, her face twisted with disgust. "Chez Laurent? Jesus Christ, Frank. You made reservations at Chez Laurent looking like that?" Frank looked down at himself. He wore his newest jeans, a pressed shirt, the jacket Sarah had picked out. "I can change," he offered. "Into what? Your other pair of Walmart khakis? Your funeral suit that's 10 years out of style?" She shot back with a bitter laugh. "Do you know how embarrassing it is when everyone can tell you're a construction worker? Even dressed up, you look like you're playing pretend." The flowers lowered to Frank's side. "Sarah, what's going on?" he asked quietly. "It's about everything. 20 goddamn years of the same thing. You coming home covered in dirt. You falling asleep in that recliner by 8:30. You thinking a big night out is beer and wings at Sullivan's?" She spat out each complaint like poison. Frank set the flowers on the counter carefully. "I thought you understood. My job is hard work. I'm tired when I get home. But I do it for us," he tried to explain. "For me." Sarah's voice rose to a shriek. "You think I wanted this? You think I dreamed of living in a 3-bedroom ranch with a man whose idea of conversation is concrete mix ratios?" Each word landed like a physical blow. "You said you loved this house. You picked everything," Frank reminded her. "Because I was trying to make the best of it," she interrupted. "Do you know what it's like when Jennifer talks about her husband's promotion to senior partner? Or when Michelle shows pictures from Tuscany, and I have to smile and pretend I'm not dying inside? Do you know what it's like making excuses for why my husband has dirt under his fingernails at every social event?" Frank felt something cold settling in his chest. "I've never hidden what I am," he said steadily. "I was 22. I was young and stupid and thought love was enough. I thought you'd have ambition. But you never did. You're exactly the same person you were 20 years ago, except older and more boring," she declared viciously. Silence filled the kitchen. Frank could hear the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming. "Is there someone else?" he asked, his voice unnaturally calm. Sarah's face flushed. "What?" "No. Jesus, Frank, not everything is that simple," she deflected. "But you've thought about it," he pressed. She turned away, but not before he caught something in her expression. "That's not—" she started. "Who?" he demanded. "It doesn't matter," she muttered. "Who, Sarah?" he repeated firmly. She whirled back, eyes blazing. "You want to know? Fine, Vincent Hendricks. Remember him? The guy I dated before you? He's a marketing director now. Lives in Westbrook Heights. Drives a BMW. Takes his wife to St. Lucia every winter." She threw the words at him like weapons. Frank knew Vincent. Sarah had mentioned him twice in 20 years. Once when they'd run into him at a restaurant 5 years ago, once when she'd gotten a Facebook friend request from him last year. "You've been talking to him?" he asked. "We're Facebook friends. He messages sometimes. Just friendly stuff," she replied defensively. "But you know what? When he messages me, I remember what it was like to be with someone who had ambition. Someone who cared about more than beer and football. Someone who knew how to make a woman feel special." The cold in Frank's chest spread. "Feel special," he repeated quietly. "Yes, Frank. Special. Desired. Wanted," she continued ruthlessly. "Do you remember the last time you took me somewhere that didn't have peanut shells on the floor? The last time you bought me something that wasn't practical? The last time you—" She paused, then plunged ahead. "The last time you made love to me like you couldn't get enough of me, instead of like it was another chore?" Frank stood perfectly still. Construction had taught him that when things started falling, you didn't try to catch them. Sarah took his silence as permission. "Vincent was incredible in bed, Frank, passionate, creative. He made me feel things." She stopped, recognizing she'd crossed a line. "He was a real man," she said more quietly. "He had class. He had ambition, and I chose you instead. I chose your promises and your stability, and look where it got me. 20 years in a prison I helped build, with a man who thinks romance is remembering to put the toilet seat down." Frank looked at his wife. Really looked at her. When had the laugh lines become permanent frowns? When had her soft expression hardened into resentment? "I've given you everything I had," he said quietly. "Every paycheck, every hour of overtime, Every dream of starting my own business put aside for your security. That's what a husband does, she shot back. And what does a wife do, Sarah? Besides spend 20 years wishing she was with another man? He asked. The words hung between them like a blade. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. Frank reached into his jacket and pulled out the jewelry box, setting it on the counter next to the forgotten flowers. "Happy anniversary," he said flatly. He turned and walked to the bedroom, their bedroom, the one he'd painted 3 times to get the color exactly right. He sat on the bed he'd assembled in the room he'd built with his own hands. Frank Miller sat in the home he'd built and felt something fundamental break inside him. Not his heart, that would come later. What broke was his faith, and in that terrible clarity, Frank Miller began to plan. Frank woke at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his alarm. The clarity from the night before hadn't faded. It had crystallized into something harder. Sarah slept beside him, having crept back to their bed sometime in the night. She always did that. Raged, stormed off, then returned without apology. 20 years of that pattern. Not anymore. He dressed quietly and left for Patterson and Associates, where his friend Jim had practiced law since returning from college. "Frank?" Jim looked up in surprise. "It's not even 7. I need a divorce lawyer." "The best you know," Frank stated simply. Jim's coffee mug stopped midway. "What happened?" he asked. Frank gave him the abbreviated version. Sarah's confession about Vincent, her contempt for his work, 20 years of resentment. "That house is in your name only, right?" Jim asked. "I remember doing that paperwork 5 years ago." "Yeah. Sarah didn't want the hassle," Frank confirmed. "Good. Bank accounts?" Jim continued. "Joint checking and savings, but I've got a separate business account," Frank replied. "Move half today. Document everything," Jim advised while scribbling notes. "Sarah working?" "Hasn't in 15 years, Frank answered. "Alimony will be an issue, but we can minimize it. Best divorce attorney I know is Linda Toretti. She's expensive but worth it," Jim concluded. Frank's next stop was the bank. He withdrew exactly half from their joint savings, $15,000, and deposited it into his business account. Clean, legal, documented. Back in his truck, Frank made a list: phone records, credit card statements, Facebook messages, security camera footage. The last one made him pause. They'd installed cameras 2 years ago. Sarah probably forgot they recorded audio. At home, while Sarah was at her Tuesday yoga class, Frank logged into the security system. There it was. Last night's fight in high definition. Sarah's voice. Vincent was incredible in bed, Frank. Passionate. Creative. He downloaded the file, backed it up to 3 drives. Then he went through previous recordings. Sarah on the phone. "Frank's so boring I could scream. The man has no ambition." Sarah with friends. "At least your husband wears a suit to work. Mine comes home looking like he crawled out of a ditch." Every cruel word documented, time-stamped, indisputable. Frank heard Sarah's car and calmly closed the laptop. He was reviewing construction plans when she walked in. "You're home?" she said, clearly surprised. "Taking a half day? Thought we should talk," he replied evenly. Sarah's expression shifted through annoyance, guilt, calculation. "Frank, I was angry. I said things I didn't mean," she offered. "Which parts?" he asked. She sat across from him, reaching for his hand. "I love you. We've built a life together," she insisted. "You said it was a prison," he reminded her. "I was being dramatic," she claimed. "Are you going to throw this in my face forever?" she demanded. "You haven't apologized. You said you were angry. That's an explanation, not an apology," he pointed out. She stood abruptly. "I'm not doing this. When you're ready to move forward, let me know," she declared. After she left, Frank logged into Facebook using her predictable password, her birthday and maiden name. The messages with Vincent went back 8 months. Starting innocent, becoming intimate. Vincent. "Remember Cape Cod?" Sarah. "How could I forget? You made me feel like a goddess." Vincent. "You still look like one." Sarah. "You always knew what to say. Frank thinks compliments are telling me the meatloaf is good." Frank screenshotted everything. His phone buzzed. Jim. Linda can see you tomorrow at 2. That evening, Sarah cooked pot roast, wore the green dress, laughed at his stories, playing the perfect wife. I was thinking we should take a vacation, she suggested over dessert. Maybe somewhere tropical? Like St. Lucia, where Vincent took his wife. Frank almost admired the audacity. We'll see, he replied mildly. Sarah's smile tightened. There's always work. Frank, she complained. That's how bills get paid, he responded. I just thought, she began. You thought I should work overtime to pay for a vacation so you can pretend you're with Vincent, he interrupted. Sarah went pale. You went through my Facebook? She gasped. I saw the messages. All of them, he confirmed. Those messages aren't what you think, she protested. Friends don't reminisce. About Cape Cod. Friends don't call at midnight when spouses are asleep, he countered. How? Did you? She started. Phone bills show times and numbers. 8 months of daily texts and calls, he explained. Sarah stood up. You been spying on me? She accused. Documenting your affair, he corrected. It's not an affair. We haven't even seen each other, she insisted. Emotional affairs are still affairs. Ask Linda Toretti, he stated. Sarah knew that name. Everyone knew Linda Toretti from the Jacobson divorce. Frank, what are you doing? She asked, her voice smaller now. What I should have done years ago. Building something for myself, he answered. He stood. I'll sleep in the guest room. We'll keep things civil until the paperwork is ready, he informed her. Frank, wait. We can work this out, she pleaded. With what money? From my embarrassing job? He asked. She flinched at her own words thrown back. 20 years, Sarah. 20 years I believed you loved me for who I was. But you've been settling. Well, I'm done being someone's consolation prize, he concluded. Frank went to the guest room and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling. Sarah was in the kitchen, maintaining pretense, cooking meals, doing laundry, even attempting intimacy Thursday night. Frank had simply turned away. She looked up hopefully when he entered. I made pancakes, she offered. We need to talk, Frank said, pouring coffee and sitting down. The divorce papers have been filed. The words hung in the air. Sarah sank into a chair. When? She whispered. Wednesday. You'll be served today, he informed her. Frank, this is crazy. We had one fight, she protested. We had 20 years of you pretending, he corrected. He pulled out a manila envelope. This is your copy. Linda Toretti is my attorney. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it. Irreconcilable differences. Emotional infidelity. Financial exploitation? She read aloud. Are you insane? 20 years of not working while I paid everything, he explained. But the house, she started, is in my name. Has been for 5 years, he stated. It's our home. She cried out, no, it's my home. Built with my money, my labor. You just decorated it, he clarified. Sarah's face flushed. I have rights, she insisted. To community property? Yes. You'll get your half. Minus what you've spent on yourself, he continued. Frank pulled out credit card statements. $43,000 over 5 years. Clothes, jewelry, spa treatments. Sarah stood, the chair falling. You bastard! You planned this, she accused. I documented it, he corrected calmly. The doorbell rang. That'll be the process server, Frank said quietly. Sarah's face crumbled. Please don't do this. I'll delete Facebook. I'll never talk to Vincent again, she begged. It's not about Vincent. You don't love me. You haven't for years, he stated simply. That's not true, she protested. Then why did you settle? He asked. The doorbell rang again. Sarah walked to the door like she was walking to execution. She returned with the official envelope, pale with shock. You have 30 days to respond, Frank informed her. You'll need to find somewhere to live soon. Where am I supposed to go? She asked desperately. Your sister's? Your mother's? He suggested. I'm not leaving my home, she declared. Frank played the recording. This house feels like a prison. You can't have it both ways, Sarah, he pointed out. Sarah sank back down. You recorded me? She asked, stunned. Security system. Every cruel word for 2 years, he confirmed. That's illegal, she protested. It's my house. One-party consent state, he explained. Tears started. but Frank had watched her deploy them strategically for 20 years. "What about alimony?" she asked through her tears. "Your attorney can argue for it, but you have a degree. You chose not to work. You contributed nothing financially. Linda thinks 2 years maximum," he answered. 2 years? How am I supposed to live?" she demanded. "Get a job," he replied simply. Sarah's tears turned to rage. "You think you've won? I'll fight this," she threatened. "With what? These?" Frank pulled out screenshots. "Vincent, you made me feel alive in ways Frank never could. I think about our nights together all the time. Should I continue?" he asked. Sarah grabbed for them, but Frank pulled back. "My lawyer has copies," he informed her. "You manipulated me," she accused. "No, I stopped protecting you from yourself," he corrected. A knock interrupted them. "That'll be Tom Gray from Gray's Moving. I hired them to help you pack," Frank announced. "Pack? Today?" she gasped. "Your personal belongings. Clothes, jewelry. The furniture stays. I paid for it," he explained. "This is my home," she cried. "It's my property." "And I'm asking you to leave," he stated firmly. Tom Gray appeared. "Frank, we're ready," Tom said. "Mrs. Miller's things are in the bedroom. Clothes, shoes, personal items only," Frank instructed. Sarah grabbed Frank's arm. "Please, not like this," she pleaded. Frank gently removed her hand. "You did this, Sarah, every time you compared me to other men." "Every time you were ashamed of my job?" he reminded her. "I'll change," she promised desperately. "No, you'll pretend until you feel secure. Then the contempt returns," he replied. Tom's crew moved past with boxes. "Our good times?" she tried. "You mean the cabin I borrowed money for? Where you complained about cell service?" he interrupted. Frank pulled out the deed. "My name only. You signed the quitclaim 5 years ago," he showed her. "You tricked me," she accused. "You didn't want to be bothered with details," he reminded her. Sarah's phone rang. "That's probably Janet wondering when to expect you," he said. By noon, it was done. Tom's truck was loaded. Sarah stood by her car with 2 suitcases. "I decorated every room," she said sadly. "You made it a showcase." "I made it a home," he replied. She drove away. Frank walked through his house, lighter now, despite the gray day. He called his brother Mike in Colorado. "About that partnership offer, is it still available?" he asked. The foundation here was solid, but the life built on it had been rotten. Time to tear down and begin again. 6 months later, Frank stood on his new deck in Colorado watching the sunset behind mountains. The house was smaller, but entirely his. Every board, every choice. His phone buzzed. "Mike, Lisa's wondering if you're still coming to dinner Sunday." Frank smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." Lisa was Mike's sister-in-law, a nurse. When introduced 3 months ago, she'd noticed his calloused hands and asked about his current project. When he explained the custom cabinets he was building, she'd asked for pictures. Her enthusiasm was genuine. "I love that you create things," she'd said. "My ex was an investment banker. Made money from money, never built anything real," she'd added with appreciation. They'd gone hiking, then dinner. She didn't mind sawdust in his hair or leaving early for concrete pours. She had her own demanding career. They complimented rather than sacrificed. His phone rang. "Linda Toretti. Frank? The divorce is finalized," she announced. 2 years alimony at $1,500 monthly. She gets jewelry, personal items, $20,000 from joint assets. You keep the house, truck, tools, business assets? "She must have fought," he commented. "The evidence of emotional affair and voluntary unemployment didn't play well," Linda explained. "Plus, the forensic accountant found she'd been skimming grocery money." "Thanks, Linda," he said. "There's more." "She remarried already," Linda added. "What? Who?" he asked, surprised. "Not Vincent?" "Some dentist from Ohio. Whirlwind romance," she informed him. Frank laughed. Sarah couldn't be alone. Parents' house to his house to another man's. Frank, in 30 years of practice, "You handled this with more grace than most," Linda observed. "Just want it out clean," he replied. After hanging up, Frank walked through his house. Miller Custom Homes was booked solid. He'd hired 2 crews, teaching them like his father taught him, with patience. Precision pride, his phone buzzed. "Sarah, I heard you're in Colorado," she said. "I am," he Confirmed. I wanted to apologize. She offered. We wanted different things, he replied simply. I did love you, Frank. In the beginning, she admitted. I know, but love isn't enough without respect, he responded. Be happy, Frank, she said softly. I am, he answered truthfully. Through the window, he saw Lisa's car approaching. She'd come straight from her shift, tired but smiling. Frank started dinner, nothing fancy. They'd eat on the deck, watching stars, talking about their days. Simple, but real. Built on solid ground by his own hands. Outside, the mountains stood eternal, solid, built to last, just like the life Frank Miller had finally built for himself. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.